Okay, so this began last week, but we will recap. We're doing Shar Bitachon, the Gate of Trust, and it's from a work called Choves HaLevavos by Rebbetzin. It's about 1,000 years old, and there are 10 gates, which is like 10 different sort of focusing on 10 different avodas or works or things we need to do. It's really most mitzvahs, or the mitzvahs that we talk about a lot, are things we need to do. These are sort of things we need to be. It's more of a state of being, and trust is definitely one of those mitzvahs. It's not about what we do, it's about kind of who we be or what we be or how we are and how we feel inside. So there is a lot of, hi Sarah Ruth, how are you?
Hi, Adina.
It's good to see you.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So we're gonna go over some of the introduction again in this lovely book. I highly recommend it to anybody who doesn't have it. It's a wonderful version of Choves HaLevavos with a lot of notes, because it's really focuses on deep inner work. And when we're doing inner work, it takes, because a lot of books are like sechel and understanding the idea. This is really focusing on bringing that idea into really experiencing the emotion of it, experiencing the state of being, of what does it mean to be in trust. Like, and it's not the same as other emotions, because it's really a state of being. It's something that permeates all of our other faculties. So it begins with this introduction, and it's pretty cool because he starts telling us the benefits of trust, which is funny because we don't usually hear like, okay, I'm going to sell you this mitzvah. Let me tell you the benefits of this mitzvah, right? Like, when do we hear that we're told, like at the very beginning of something that's going to tell us, describe what we need to do or be, that's going to tell us the benefits of it, right? That comes like way later, right? Na'aseh v'nishma. But this, we're being told right away, like the benefits of trust. And then there's this question: is trust actually, is it a mitzvah? Like, and do we see that listed in the 613 mitzvos? And where is that? So there's opinions that say that we actually do see this as part of the 613 mitzvos. There is a mitzvah when we're going to war to not fear our enemy, right? Somebody that's going to war, cannot be afraid of the enemy, and they make an announcement, and whoever's afraid to go back home, because there's just no place for that. And connected to this mitzvah of not fearing our enemies, actually the mitzvah in trusting Hashem, because what's the reason why we're not afraid of our enemy? Because we have total trust in Hashem. When we are serving nothing but Hashem, then the enemy doesn't scare us, right? There's no fear there. It's also connected to one of the very big mitzvahs, which is Yiras Hashem, which actually it's a constant mitzvah, right? We have constant mitzvahs of Avas Hashem, love of Hashem, and Yiras Hashem, which is fear, awe of Hashem. And that's like connected to the second mitzvah in Torah, is to not have other gods, which mean to not, so that would be connected to having Bitachon in Hashem, right? And when we go on, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Forgive me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Great to see you. So when we go on to, we're going to go on into this mitzvah, but Bitachon in Hashem is part of the mitzvah of fearing Hashem, because when we have fear of Hashem, we don't fear anything else, right? The Baal Shem Tov's father, before he passed away, said, love every Jew with all of your heart and soul, and fear nothing but Hashem himself, which they really go hand in hand, because you can't really freely love if, and we'll get into this more, you can't really freely love another if you're fearing something other than Hashem, because if that happens, then we're actually putting our worth and our value in that other person's eyes. Think about it. Like, if you're just only loving another, and we'll go into more what trust is, but we're also like putting our trust in that in like a, might not be the healthiest way, right? But if we have the same things, we have, on one hand, You can love every Jew with all your heart. So you can love with complete and total abandon. And why can we do that? Because we completely only put our trust and our value and our worth in Hashem's hands, and Hashem's hands only, right? We have complete trust in Hashem, which means complete only fear, like only fear Hashem, right? Only fear Hashem. It's the only master. So he goes on to explain, we have the benefits of it, which we discussed last week. We have the first benefit was tranquility, which is a piece of, it's actually, we said that was like kind of more of a piece in the body. It's the recognition, like a perfect servant has only one master. We don't think of servitude as a positive thing. But when we were taken out of Mitzrayim, right, it says we were slaves to slaves, and then our ultimate freedom was becoming Eved Hashem, right, servants of Hashem, because it really matters what we're serving. So the perfect servant to the perfect master, it only has that one master. I mean, you think about the idea of a servant is actually that they're tied to that which they serve, and they don't have the ability, they don't have any autonomy. That is what makes them a servant, right? So a servant is actually they're only ever trusting in that which they serve. That's what they serve as their source of sustenance and providing and all that. So having tranquility is actually knowing, is being this level of service of Hashem, knowing that like everything I'm receiving, the only thing I'm relying upon is Hashem. And we spoke about how this can come misguided in certain ways and clarified what it could mean. So, a person could kind of take that and say, okay, I'm only trusting Hashem. I'm not trusting in others. So I'm not really receiving my paycheck from my boss, and I'm not really receiving this from this and this person. And it could, I must have to trust in myself. So we'll go through why some of those other things aren't 100% also, but why would then a person, if they know that they have talents and they know that they have gifts and they know if what they offer is, these are things that Hashem gave me, like, why would I then not trust in myself? If somebody knows they have tremendous wealth, like, okay, I rely on the wealth, I rely on the intellect, I rely on people, right? So, and also, and then something even more noble is a person relying on their hishtadlus, a person relying on their efforts. Okay, I'm doing my part and God's doing his part. And in the very beginning here, in the introduction, we tell him a person is not to rely on their own efforts. As we get deeper into the text, we'll go into where our efforts are and what our perspective should be. But in this regard, when we're flushing out what is this emotion of trust, why should a person not rely on their own efforts, right? Because we're told we have to put an effort, but it's really our efforts. A lot of people put in efforts and do the right thing, and they don't necessarily, right, get the outcome, right? The efforts are what we need to do, but the source of the desired outcome is Hashem, and it's Hashem himself. And he has many, many means to bring about the particular outcome, right? So, and psychologically, what can happen to a person when they're trusting in themselves is that's like when we can become really insecure or really nervous, or like, what if this thing is taken from me, right? It's like hard to settle into, we might have tremendous gifts, but it's hard to settle into our greatness when we're trusting in ourselves, because some place in us kind of intrinsically knows that's kind of a lie. Like, everything I have is from Hashem, and just like receiving that and allowing ourselves to be the conduit, right? To allow that to be. When we're trusting in ourselves, we're sort of afraid of whatever that gift is. There's always fear attached to it. So it could be that somebody has tremendous wealth, but if they're trusting in that wealth, they actually simultaneously have fear of ever losing it, right? Because they're not recognizing that it's totally just a manifestation of Hashem in their life, as manifesting themselves in this way, and it's really just total reliance on Hashem. Versus when it's a subtle thing, like see Hashem in a bracha, but don't totally give it over to him, and we put ourselves there instead, then we become constantly afraid of like what's going to happen if we lose that. And when we have fear, we kind of shrink into a place of lack. I actually wanted to mention, which I mentioned in the last class, or still in these days, that so this period of time from like the 29th of Sivan was actually the day that Hashem sends out, or that Moshe Rabbeinu actually sends out the spies to tour Eretz Yisrael. And we're also in Tammuz, which is the spiritual koach of this month is the koach of vision. And the spies went to tour up the land of Israel, and they came back and kind of instilled fear in all the people. But really, Hashem was giving us the promised land and is always giving us the promised land. And I think it's very auspicious that we're teaching this in this time, because it's really to bring us to a place of what are we seeing, and knowing, Bitachon is knowing that what we are looking at is the glory of Hashem, and we are walking with Hashem. And Bitachon, contrary to the maybe understanding that it's like we're bringing something into existence wasn't there before, Bitachon is actually completely receiving totally the desired land that Hashem wishes to give us and who he is, and really flushing out and seeing the truth of the story and tasting the truth and the sweetness of Hashem's goodness. So I just wanted to make that connection, just because we're getting a special koach in this time to really be conscious of seeing Hashem in what we're looking at with our eyes, but seeing the deeper story and living with that bitachon in Hashem, that Hashem is constantly giving us the promised land. We live in times where there are times that we've lived through, and we've obviously seen difficult things, and in our personal lives we've seen difficult things, but we also live in times where we have a leader of the generation that's saying, like, come and receive your reward, right? We don't need to have those. We don't need to have things come out difficult for us to receive goodness. We've already done that. So it's not arrogant to think that bitachon is not necessarily, I'm just going to manifest something good. It's more complicated and nuanced, and it's more about connecting to Hashem. But in this generation, we're actually giving a directive from a tzaddik that, like, we are coming into times to receive tremendous wealth, to receive tremendous bracha, to receive tremendous health. All of the brachas, like, it's not, and that's also a place to take, like, our ego out of it. Like, what I want, it is what Hashem's want, and totally in line with each other. And so we'll hopefully be able to remove some of the blocks and some of the layers by understanding this and understanding what it is to, like, step into a place of trust, or even settle into a place of trust, because we'll see it's actually kind of the way that it's an all-encompassing emotion and state of being. It's also this kind of emotion sort of always there. And when we have anxiety, it's usually because we're not putting this in the right thing. It's like a faculty that's always there. It's like one of the deepest points of the soul. So a lot of the cause of anxiety is that we're placing this faculty in other things. We're, like, choosing kind of a lower consciousness or lower reality, chas v'shalom. So the point is that we want to align ourselves with, like, Hashem's frequency, align ourselves with the abundant goodness. And I was, like, talking about this with my husband a little bit today. Like, I was like, you could almost say, we were talking about it, like, you could almost say that bitachon, like trust, is like a vessel to receive the one who are trusting in, like, their vulnerability, which is, like, a crazy thing to say, because how do those things go together? But it's really, when you think about it as a limited, all right, we're talking about limited people, but when we put, and this is just in a way that when we put all of our stuff into doing something amazing, we have the best intentions and we're showing up with the greatest thing, and we give it over and it's misjudged or misunderstood, or somebody thinks we have an ulterior motive and we really are pure intentioned, or they're not really receiving it. It's not really being appreciated or recognized or whatever. We can feel totally like, oh, right, it feels a little weird. So when we think about that, when we align ourselves with the place, like, Hashem is constantly giving, and Hashem is not limited the way that humans are. Like, giving in total abundance, right? The Rebbe Marash says there's never a lack of sustenance. There's sometimes a lack in bitachon, which might limit what we are getting. And the Rebbe says it's like a faucet. Bitachon is like a faucet. When it's open, when it's there, it just flows, right? Everything just flows. So it's like this creating a vessel to be able to receive, and not able to receive. Yes, there are physical things that we want and need and that are holy and divine, but this is really more about having the intimacy and the deep connection with Hashem, because coming into a place, really, we always talk about, like, you need to trust a friend, right? You need to trust a spouse, but we can't have healthy trust in another, in the way between trust between human beings, if we can't have complete and total trust in Hashem, and we will see why. So the next little piece that we came across, the next thing in the introduction, the next benefit of period of trusting, is that we have this independence. And independence meaning that a person that's aligned with Hashem and their focus is their service of Hashem, and it really is their service of Hashem, because sometimes our connection with Hashem could mean that I'm focusing on my connection with Hashem, I'm gauging that connection by how I feel, right? Like, what's going on now. So that might mean, like, okay, well, like, maybe I don't want to do the dishes so much because that seems really lowly. If I'm focusing on my service of Hashem, I'm focusing on, and it's obviously connection, but I'm focusing on, like, where's Hashem going to show up with me now in my life, right? How am I going to find intimacy with the divine here and now, even when I'm doing something that I might not have, like, chosen, but to sign up, like, Hashem's choosing this to be our date place right now. And it could be the dishes, and it could be the grocery store, and it could be, like, it could be cooking or cleaning. It could be a million things. And it could also be learning and hiking and praying, whatever it is, but to allow Hashem to kind of take us on that date of where to meet him. And this, like, kind of emotional independence. So why is this called independence, right? So oftentimes when we're, and it can come across, like, in a work environment, it can come across in different relationships, but a work environment for me is like an easy one to grasp. Like, when you're working, and, like, sometimes we have a boss that's, like, a little temperamental, a little scary, right? And we kind of will, like, jerk, like, have this, like, a little bit of fear, like this fear of, I remember when I was in Boston, like, and I would be on my way to work, and I would be davening, and I would, like, have this fear, and I was, like, noticing, I was like, what is this fear of? Like, is anybody hurting me? Is anything happening to me? Like, what's going on? And it was, like, this crazy fear of, like, I'm going to be a couple minutes late and someone's going to yell at me. And I didn't even know for sure I was going to be late, but it was so out of proportion. And it's such I don't know, for me, it's such a simple example to grasp, but I remember noticing, like, my body is in total anxiety right now, and, like, nothing's happening to me. It was like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm afraid of something that's literally not real. Like, I need to just be here with Hashem. Hashem is time and space. So, like, if I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late. If I'm going to be on time, I'm going to be on time. Like, I'm not in control of that. That's Hashem's paper. My job is to be right here and right now, and aligned with what I need to be doing here and now, which is in that context, I mean, it was like davening on my way to work. So that was in a very obvious way, but more like the not being afraid, because usually not being afraid and not being afraid, this wasn't like, and not even talking about things that are like being afraid of our life and death. These are things of being afraid of something that's so subtle, like my self-worth, my value, my goodness, so putting our value in somebody else's hands. So, like, this kind of independence, and it speaks about in the Sefer of not being afraid to sell somebody, like, when they're wrong. So, like, let's say, standing up for what's right in a way that even nowadays we see on the college campuses, where there are things happening that are blatantly wrong. And so it's like a situation to, obviously, the time and space, but it's really also not being afraid to stand up from within ourselves. Sometimes we have this voice, like this little, like, misnagdish voice that we have in ourselves that's, like, just totally in the realm of, like, logic based on what we think is a social norm or understanding. I'm not talking about things of kedusha or klipa. I'm talking about, like, I'm not talking about things like, oh, holy, and I'm saying, like, like a very limited way. And, like, we think, like, so it can go either way. So sometimes it means having to say something, or and not being afraid to say something. But oftentimes I'm just, because like we're all Jews here and friends here, and so I think in more subtle context, most of the times we're not trying to pick fights with our friends or telling them they're wrong, and it's not our place at all to be saying that. So where does this apply? Where does this emotional independence apply here? It's like to be emotionally free of like whatever the voice is telling me, like whatever the judgment is saying of like, I need to kind of escape this reality because it's just not right, right? And not in a time, I'm not talking about in a time where things are actually just totally like hefech hatov in like a real way where somebody really needs to say something. But because I'm just, and the safer is speaking about times where, yes, somebody really does need to stand up and say something, to not be afraid of somebody that's really doing something blatantly wrong, and to not just go with the social norm. But I'm saying in our lives, or in my life at least, I live in a holy city spot where I don't usually see people that are doing something that I need to like tell them to stop. And it's like everything people are doing is good, whether it's exactly like I do or not. So I'm saying it even applies to those little inner voices within ourselves that say like what should be, and to also know when we need to silence the critic and have that emotional independence, and also to not seek validation, right? Not seeking validation, not seeking to not have an expectation. If I show up, I can't then show up under the condition that somebody else shows up in to receive me in a certain way, right? We can do our best to show up, but we can't really have expectations of others, and we can't like gauge our success of how we showed up on the reaction or the feedback or whatever others. Of course, it's great to get great feedback, but our essential value and essential worth is, it's unconditional and it's unmovable and it's irreplaceable and it's always, and it's just being in a place of complete alignment and that like emotional, like that independence with Hashem. Like I am not at the whim of anybody. It's being able to leave that toxic, maybe it's like a job that's toxic, like, or something that's like taking us away. Our role as a woman is very unique. And I found like since getting married, having to cut out things that draw me away, like from that place of being, and to be able to say no to those things and not be afraid that like, oh, like if I'm not making that money, like it's not going to show up in my life because I need to be this and this, and then have the stress. And I also need to be like away from this and this and this. It's like, no, wait a minute. Whose story is that, right? Being able to say, okay, maybe this workplace is not working for me, and that's not where I need to be right now. And Hashem has many messengers and many agents, and I'm going to step out of alignment with my ego that says I need to suffer in this thing, and I need to come back home and be a grump and be cranky and not be able to get it together because I spent all my energy out there. I have nothing here, right? To be able to say, wait a minute, Hashem's got a better plan. I'm going to let that go and come back into alignment, right, with myself, and not rely. So like, we don't need to, we have like emotional independence, right? We are, and our job is to kind of stay in emotional independence. And as women, I feel like it's really important because also like with our spouses, to just be able to nurture ourselves and fill ourselves up from that connection and from within, because then we're actually that makes the vessel whole. That makes the vessel without cracks. So then when our spouse shows up, there's no cracks in the cup, right? We can contain it because we've taken care of that part. Like we have our emotional independence, we have our self-worth, right? We have our essential value, and we're in line with it, like in a very godly way. Then we have peace of mind and serenity is another. And that's like not trying to manipulate the system of the world. Like I know that whatever I need comes from Hashem, and also knowing that I don't need to know all the details of all the way that it gets there. And the Chovos HaLevavos goes on to speak about the difference between a person that has peace of mind because he knows his sustenance is coming, and he compares it to an alchemist, which was very popular, I guess, in those times, where people that were, it was kind of like a magician that would turn like metal into like silver and gold. And it was kind of this sort of illegal scamming sort of thing. So he says like a person that can just turn any material into gold, right? Who was it? Rip Van Winkle? Who was the one that spun stuff into gold? Straw into gold? I can't remember exactly. It's a fairy tale. But like, so okay, if I could turn anything into gold, the person doesn't worry about money, right? So he's comparing it to just have this kind of serenity. And then he goes on to say 10 ways how the one who trusts in Hashem is greater than the one that can turn the material into gold, being that the one that trusts in Hashem doesn't even need the materials at all, right? He's not reliant on anything whatsoever. His job is to align himself with Hashem, to align himself with his essential self, and to know that Hashem has infinite means of providing. So even if he's lacking this little thing, right? The alchemist, if he's lacking a little ingredient, he can't do anything, right? So knowing if I'm lacking this little thing, doesn't matter. Hashem can do anything. Staying focused on the goal. And that's like, I think that sometimes even with the idea of bitachon, I've heard this said a lot, like, what's the difference between trust and bitachon? And I've heard people say, well, like trust is just general and bitachon is specific. Like about a specific matter. So I don't know if like I 100%, I do agree bitachon can be about a specific matter and it does focus on that. But I believe that a person can live their life in a state of bitachon and a state of wonder at the same time, because we know it's going to be good. We don't know how it's going to unfold. We don't know every step. Bitachon is keeping our heads above water. When it doesn't promise that things won't ever look tough and things won't ever look difficult. It's that when we're in bitachon, when we are bitachon, then we just don't perceive it as difficult. We're choosing connection with Hashem in that moment, right? And we're also not getting discouraged that, oh, because this, then this. We're not making an unrealistic calculation. Because I see that it's working out this way and this is what it is. We're not then making the equation, oh, this plus this equals. No, we're knowing Hashem is actually giving me exactly what is good in a way that I understand good to be. Not something good that I have to bend all of reality to see it as good. It's going to be good in a way that I understand and perceive good to be, in a way that it is, and it's going to be in a way that's the best for me, better than I could have even brought it to myself, right? And to be able to live also simultaneously in that sense of wonderment. That really means living in a sense of wonder with Hashem. Showing up to a relationship with Hashem is living in a sense of wonder, because Hashem is magnificent, and every act he does like is magnificent. And it's like showing up and allowing ourselves to it's like experience, really be with Hashem in those moments and to rejoice in those moments. So it was interesting, because the next piece of this, where he's saying the benefits of bitachon, the next one is financial satisfaction, which I just found this just like, whoa, because financial satisfaction, what do we think of when we think of financial satisfaction, right? We think of, okay, so I have like tons of money, right? Like I'm financially satisfied. I have like infinite cash, infinite flow. So interestingly enough, so the Chovos HaLevavos teaches us that actually infinite flow, great. We should always have flow, but infinite cash does not equal infinite flow, right? And so he says, financial satisfaction means I'm satisfied with my lot. A person can have tons of money in the bank, be a multi-millionaire, they could still be worried and they could still lose all their money in one day. Another person could have not a penny in the bank and be totally happy and content and with Hashem, and like, who knows what could happen. My friend's father, who's a shaliach, he was at the hell one time after Gimel Tammuz, and he like did not know what he's going to do. Like financially, what were they going to do? Like they were going to lose their house, and he had actually before Gimel Tammuz had like begged the Rebbe to let him like leave shluchas many times, and the Rebbe was like, no, they need you there. And on his way out of the aisle, somebody recognized him. And I hope I'm telling the story accurately, but this is just a story. Somebody recognized him and like paid off their Chabad house, just like offered to pay off their house. Like, oh, like I want to just buy your house for you outright. Just, I don't, there's other details or maybe, but like that is the gist of the story. So it's like one person could have everything and be in constant stress, another person, and it doesn't mean that miracles don't happen for either. Look, a miracle can happen when we're in constant stress also. And we could, the poor person could stay poor and still happy. And that's like one of the things that he really points out here. Actually says a person, the financial satisfaction is not the same as financial abundance. Financial satisfaction is that a person sees Hashem in everything that he has. He's happy with what he has. And in some ways he's relieved that it doesn't have more than he can handle. Like, and it was interesting that it goes into that, like a person that has much, he sees it that he's so grateful for Hashem that he gave him the money and now he can fulfill all of his obligations. But the money does come with obligations, right? Person has more money, more problems, which is from the Mishnah, really. But the person that's lacking, and we live in a time where we're told we're going to be rich and we should be rich. And when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, everybody had 90 camels, and that was like, I think 9 camels, and I think that was the least amount. So we don't have to worry about these things. And nowadays we really do all have abundance, even when we don't think we do. Compared to other generations, we have like tons. It's really Baruch Hashem. And so we don't have to, we should always have the bracha of having a lot, and we'll have a lot of obligations and give lots of stuff and it'll be amazing. But being able to be happy with our portion, because having abundance is more about, like when a person wants abundance, what do they want? Do we want to be able to count the dollars in the bank, or do we want to be able to feel abundant, right? We want the feeling of abundance, the state of abundance, right? The state of flow. We don't want the stress. So a person can have tons and they could be so busy counting all the little that they have, but they don't feel the flow and they don't feel the abundance. So really, what we really desire is to feel the flow, to feel like the Yidden in the Midbar were eating out of Hashem's hand, right? And it said the greater the Bitachon, the closer the man fell to them. And it says like, so we'll get on later about how a person has to make a vessel in some way for Parnasa. The Baal Shem Tov's vessel for Parnasa was he would knock on a door. He wouldn't even ask. He knocked on a door. He moved on to the next. The person would open the door. They would shout, "Hey, you knocked on my door." And then they would give him money. Like, because the level of his bitachon was so high, people were calling him down the street, like, I need to give you money. So it's really the financial, it's the satisfaction, right? Like to feel satiated, like seva, like satisfied with what we have, and not because being satisfied with what we have doesn't mean, oh yeah, I feel like I have a little, but I'm happy anyway. Satisfied means I feel like I have a lot. Like I have a lot, and knowing that even if, and then we'll go on to the next one and we'll connect them together. The next one, the financial responsibility, which is interesting how he mentions that. That's like a good thing, right? Person wants financial responsibility, but to connect that with what I do have is from Hashem. So if I don't have it in my bank account now, it doesn't mean that I don't have it, because we'll like move into the financial responsibility means that everything in my bank account actually belongs to Hashem. And I'm just watching it for him until like it's needed, but it's not really mine. So that's like the equalizer. The financial satisfaction is in both ways, whether it's a lot or little, recognizing it's not actually mine. And in the same way that the guy has tons in his bank account, maybe the guy doesn't have what it's bank account, Hashem in his bank account. So he knows he has plenty and that he won't lack for anything, right? And there's really an interesting story. So the next one is the financial responsibility. And this is one of the benefits, right? That a person gets to be, he recognizes why is financial responsibility something that is a benefit. It's because a person recognizes that he is just his bank account is Hashem's bank account, right? Hashem has, the whole world belongs to Hashem. When a person has tremendous wealth, Hashem's trusting this wealth is, it's energy in a specific kind of way. Money is man, right? It's in a specific kind of sustaining way. There's different kinds of energy, but it's this kind of that sort of energy. and Hashem is trusting them with it, right? That they're going to do the right thing with it, like Hidr mitzvah and tzedakah and godly things, and in their house, like Yehuda Nasi lived a very lavish life, right? And he was a very holy person, right? And it was all for Hashem, and it's all bringing Hashem into this world. And Bitachon, like the mitzvah Bitachon, is really, it's like dira batachtonim. We are that tachton, and we are allowing ourselves to be a dira for Hashem to unmask himself, right? To take away some of the tzimtzum only that we're able to recognize that he's only just making it just so it's perfect for me. The only tzimtzum is that it fits exactly right, and that I'm like, the tzimtzum is just for the purpose of the revelation. So it's like making the kli to allow Hashem to remove some of that symptom, remove some of that, and to totally just reveal the pure goodness of what it is. So the financial responsibility. So there's an interesting story about this that I just heard last Shabbos. It was the yard site of my husband's grandfather, Yosef Weinberg. So we were at somebody's house here in Spot who actually who went into, my husband's grandfather was a very brilliant man, and the Rebbe called him a genius, very, very holy, great, wonderful, legendary chassid. And he wrote and taught, he did lessons in Adina and taught beautiful things, but he was a fundraiser, and he was like a Rebbe's fundraiser. And so when this rabbi here was telling the story, he said when he went into fundraising, he was like, who am I going to get advice from? I'm going to ask Rabbi Weinberg. So he asked him, he said, he's like, everything belongs to the Rebbe. Like, it doesn't belong to them. When you go, he was like, you think that you're going, this guy has a lot of money and he's going to give you the money to help the Rebbe's mostos. And so the Rebbe was like, yeah. And he was like, no, everything belongs to the Rebbe. He gave it to them to hold on to him until he needs it. You're coming to collect what's already belongs to the Rebbe. You're not going to ask him. So one time he went to a man, and this was a long time ago, and my husband's grandfather, and he asked for $100,000. He's like, I need $100,000. He sat down and made a meeting with the man, asked for $100,000, and the man said no. And it's not even like he gave him a less amount of money. He just was like, totally no. Okay, have a great day. He said, thank you for your time. Can I just ask, and this, my husband's grandfather says, can I just ask you one question? The man says, sure, ask. He said, what did you do that you are being prevented from being part of like the Rebbe's mostot? And the man thought about it, and he said, okay, I'll give you $100,000. He said, okay, I'll give you $100,000, and wrote him the check, because he was like, he didn't have that he's going to somebody and asking them for money that belonged to them. He's like, it belongs to Hashem. And so to him, he was actually a very wealthy man. He saw his money. I'm holding on to Hashem's stuff. And that doesn't mean that, and that means that we get to spend it, we get to use it, and we get to have full lives, and use it for holy things and in holy ways. But to have that, have that knowledge that belongs to Hashem, which means now when somebody has that knowledge, they're not always afraid of losing it. A lot of times people are really afraid of losing their money. I found this phenomenon. This isn't really part of the class, but I just have to say it. I found this phenomenon that like people that give huge donations, like they'll either give like a $10,000 donation or like nothing. It's like, we don't have tons of money, but like, yeah, you're my friend. Like I'll throw like whatever, $18, 36, whatever we've got, like, but I've noticed this interesting phenomenon that, I mean, it could be also why they have a lot of money, but the people that have like lots, like they'll only make really big donations. And it's like this thing of like everything we have, it's just like a very interesting thing of like everything we have belongs to Hashem. And when we recognize that, then we're actually never afraid of losing it. And we know that like the more we give, the more we get. I forgot which wealthy person it was. Somebody was asked like what he made that year. and I don't remember who it was, some very, very, very rich person. And they gave this number like 4 million. They were like, that's literally a joke. Like, you're worth billions. He was like, oh, well, like, that's what I gave. Like, my worth is what I gave. It's like not what I made. Okay, like that's Hashem stuff. But it's just all how when we allow Hashem into the picture of the good we have, then we get more. We never lose. We can't lose to I, right? Like, we can't lose to the source of all, right? And so, and it was this other example. There's this one story I wanted to share. There's a Rebbe letter. It's in the notes here also. I received it years ago. Actually, I was like, actually, it's a crazy story. I was reading Likutei Diborim. It's by the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's Yud-Beis Tammuz. It's fitting to mention him. And he wrote that the Rebbe Rashab said that the merit of the Alter Rebbe was so great that a chassid for sure, and if a chassid's in trouble, if he reads a few lines of Tanya and he focuses on it, and then briefly requests, like from the Rebbe, like, Rebbe, I want a bracha for briefly, then for sure, in the merit of the Alter Rebbe, he'll be answered. So closed the book and I opened the Tanya, because I wasn't married yet and I wanted to move there at Israel, and I wanted to like start a life and family, and and so I opened Perek 36, which is about Dira B'Tachtonim, right? Hashem's full desire is Dira, and I read the first few lines. Rebbe, I want a Dira B'Tachtonim. Like, what? How can I make a dwelling for what? Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, how can I make a dwelling for Hashem's world? And then I started to sing a nigun, which is one of the Tzemach Tzedek's nigun. And then I was on this group, a Rebbe Letters WhatsApp group, where you would just every now and then get a letter from, like, a Rebbe letter would come to it. So like literally I'm singing the nigun and it was like, bing, it was a letter from the Rebbe, right? Just like that. And the letter was, it was saying that it was about like worrying and anxiety, and like, you have my bracha, you have my father-in-law's bracha. It was interesting because this letter is like in this book that I'm learning. He's like, you have two choices basically. And a bracha from a Rebbe is always fulfilled. You have two choices. You can either waste your time being anxious now, and eventually you'll get the thing that you wanted, and then you're gonna have a lot of regrets and have to do tshuva for the fact that you wasted all the time being worried. So like, you're going to be worried now, then you'll get the thing you really wanted, and you'll be worried later because you'll be worried about the fact you were worried. Or you could have bitachon and know everything's going to be okay and live with the tranquility and peace of mind. And then when you receive the thing which you're going to receive regardless, then you can say, be proud of yourself. Like, I stepped on board, like, with Hashem. I was able to let go. And I love this letter because it's obviously an amazing letter, but oftentimes we think like my trust, because we always say bitachon, it's a vessel to receive the bracha of Hashem, right? The reward for the bitachon is filling up that bitachon cup for what the thing it trusted in, right? For what it trusted in. But this is saying, whether you trust in it or not, you're going to get it. Right? It's your experience. How are you going to be when that happens? Like, what's it going to be like? Like, where are you going to be in the journey? What are you going to be like? How are you going to experience it? That's the choice you have, right? We're always going to receive the good. It's how are we going to tap in? What frequency are we going to meet Hashem at? Are we going to allow Hashem to kind of put on his slippers and come into the home and be and allow, things can go as good as you can stand. What's the book, Hannah? That's the book. Like, that sort of thing. Like, allow Hashem to give to us like as much, to allow things to get as good as we can stand. Are we going to be able to tolerate the goodness and just like keep opening and expanding and allow the faucet to open, or to remain in the fear, right? Or to remain and the fear really is mistrust or misplaced trust. So I'm not looking at the time. I'm not sure. Where are we in time? Oh, okay. So and then, okay, we'll wrap up the introduction today. We'll get into a little bit of trust and we'll do some takeaways. And then after he lists these things, the Cholos Halavavos, he mentions like material benefits, which are, it's fascinating because like, I don't know, I loved how he's like, he really writes in the first person. He's like, I can tell you these because this is how I experienced it. He's not like, I studied in a book and this and this and this. He's like, this is what happened for me in my life when I stepped into trust. And this is like 1,000 years ago. And this is how the author is writing. And it's really amazing. So he's like, stress-free. It's immunity from the fatigue of traveling, harm-free employment. I'm just reading you like the little titles and what's going to explain, like no distress, and always happy. Meaning there are so many times we think we need to jump through hoops, and because we think that it's happening through me, right? It's happening in my co-host, and if it doesn't hurt, it's not good, or it's not happening. And that doesn't mean like sometimes we do need like, look, somebody when we work out, the muscles burn, but it's like a good kind of feeling of, but sometimes we push that in the wrong way and we like kind of schmata ourselves, right? We like think like if I'm not, and we're trying to like please a standard, and if we notice like we can kind of feel it, we're trying to like please somebody else or in an unhealthy way, or gain validation in an unhealthy way, or gain something that we think we had because of, and it's always, this is why it's so important for us to be able to get in touch with our essential desires. We can only really get in touch with our essential desire when we have this bitachon, because then we can trust it. We can trust Hashem and we can trust ourselves, right? We can trust not like ourselves that will get it done, but we can actually hear our own desire, because the bitachon in Hashem is the safe place for the desire to express itself, right? And it's also, yeah, exactly. The bitachon in Hashem is a safe place for the desire to express itself. It's like the same way, like, it doesn't mean that we're making it happen, but it's the same way like the earth doesn't make a tree. The earth is a safe place for the potential to reveal itself, right? And like, that's what it is. So in that, so with all of these things that he's talking about, like harm-free employment, and back in the days, things were very different, but these could even be, everything can be understood. This is Torah on deeper and deeper layers. Sometimes like we take a job because we think we need the money, and it has to happen this way because I'm so afraid that like, what if you stepped into your greatest dream and money came to you that way? Like, why limit yourself? So it's like, or like being in distress, right? To like just be totally like in a place of feeling like worn down and stressed out, and like I have to find all the answers, and feeling crushed, and sometimes or being able to kind of ride the tide, right? Sometimes we come into distress when we see something happening not exactly planned. And there's that other story, one more story, the Baal Shem Tov cow. There was, I don't remember all the details, but we'll tell one more story. There was a man, he was a poor man, and he was fine. He was living with Bitachon, and he had his one little cow, and he was feeding his family milk every day, and they were just very simple. And I'll have to double check if this story was right for this point of this. I'll just tell it this way, how I know it now. And one day the Baal Shem Tov comes to him with Siddim. I don't remember if he recognized it was the Baal Shem Tov or not. And he says, like, what do you got to eat? We want to eat some meat. And he's like, oh, I only have like this cow. They're like, great, we'll take that. So the guy, being the good man he is, sends the wife out, like, you know, or they go shuck, he shucks the cow, and the wife prepares the meat and feeds the meat. And so then he didn't have his cow. And eventually he actually became very, very wealthy, and he was traveling in town, and they said, oh, there's a great tzaddik here, come meet him. And it was the Baal Shem Tov, and he sees him, he says, you ate my cow. You're the guy that ate my cow. Like I had nothing. That was all I had. And like, you ate my cow. And the Baal Shem Tov said, like, as long as you had that cow, like you were never going to go and collect the fortune that was for you. Like you had this great fortune, like waiting for you, that was yours. And you were so satisfied. So this, like, I'm just throwing everything on its head right now, right? Being satisfied with your portion. And the Baal Shem Tov, but the point is, when the Baal Shem Tov eats your cow, don't cry about it. So be happy with what you have now. But maybe if you're happy with what you have, be happy with what you have now. And if the Baal Shem Tov eats your cow, don't be distressed about it. Just stay in trust and collect your fortune. And I find often, I'm telling my husband that he ate my cow, but It's good. No, that's not good. Don't do that. But I'm saying, like, we have things in our lives, and we have to remind ourselves, like, okay, this is that. This is what that is. Like, we see something and we're doing something, and we're really relied on a thing for bringing the source of whether it's art, whatever it is, our money or our health, whatever it is. We see something, we're doing something, we're like, that's the thing for that, and then that keli breaks, and we're like, oh no, we lost the thing. We didn't lose the thing. The kli broke, but Hashem might have maybe had to make a bigger kli because we were receiving more. And so to stay in that consciousness and in that frequency. Next week, we're going to get into like the kishkas of like really what the feeling and the experience of bitachon is, like, what is it, and also how, and then wait, how many? Oh, we only have, okay. And how that's relevant, like the real bitachon, how it's relevant with the only, like, real full trust can only be in Hashem. And we will see why that is. And it is not because people are untrustworthy. It's just that there's a certain level of trust that doesn't apply to man in a way. And we'll see that it's a cliffhanger. We'll see that based on the definition of trust, why why it's only relevant for Hashem. And we'll also see how having lived, and we'll see more. We saw a lot in the introduction, how having bitachon within Hashem makes us kelim for bitachon and other people. Because when our worth and our value and our goodness, we know that it's constant, right? It's unchangeable. Now I can have relationships with other people. I'm not looking for things they can't give me, right? I'm not looking for a person to give me what only Hashem can give me, right? So with that, so we'll get more into that next week. And want to wish everybody a lovely Yud Beis Tammuz, and thanks for coming on. And let's I want to hear let's go around and say some